Welcome, everyone. We are so excited to have Dennis and Christina here today because they provided a fantastic session last year at the CalSPR conference. And in fact, it was one of the highest rated sessions we have had. And one of the things that if you've been to a CalSPR conference, is that it is really tough to go to all the things that you might love to go to. There are usually 6 or 7 choices at any given breakout time period. And so if you didn't get a chance to see their session, maybe you weren't even a CalSPR member then or didn't get to go to the conference, or maybe you went and it was so good you want to see it again, we are happy to have you here. They're going to be talking to you about branding for school districts. And I have to tell you that having been in the California school PR world for a long time, I'm Trinette Marquis, by the way, the executive director of CalSPRA. Visalia has undergone a complete transformation, an inspirational turnaround with this team at the helm. And I cannot wait to hear more about what their secrets are. I think you guys are probably with me on that one. I want to also introduce Karen Smith here is the executive admin for CalSPRA, and she really is the person that puts all of these webinars together for us and makes sure everything runs smoothly. So thank you, Karen, for all your work on making sure that our CalSPRans get access to this fantastic material. And now, as promised, I'm going to go ahead and embarrass both Dennis and Christina a little bit. So Dennis is a highly skilled digital media and content specialist with over a decade of marketing experience. In his current role, he manages Visalia Unified School District's digital presence. Hence, look at all the tech involved in having him float mysteriously above his slide deck.
What?
It's kind of amazing right now. I've never seen anything like it. He oversees social media, a podcast, content creation, website development, and he collaborates with multiple departments to achieve organizational goals. His expertise in digital media and marketing demonstrates his versatility and ability to deliver impactful results. And his partner, Christina, is also with us today. Christina Gutierrez has a decade of marketing expertise. She and Dennis work in the heart of California, right there in the center. We're all probably just a medium drive away from Visalia. She has a strong track record in developing, managing, and executing successful campaigns that have reached audiences across the San Joaquin Valley. She has a Bachelor of Arts from the UC Merced campus and is currently the PIO at Visalia, working on outreach, strategic, and crisis communication. And I understand they have been super, super busy putting on a couple of really big events lately and also undertaking boundary changes, which are always super, super fun. So I promised you I would eventually hand it over. Without further ado, I'm going to hand it over, but before they get started, here are the rules for your questions. I know you will have lots because this is good stuff. Please put anything that you want to ask a question about in the chat. I'm going to monitor it, and then they are going to leave enough time at the end to go ahead, and we'll make sure we get all the questions asked and answered at the end of the session. Make sense? Fantastic. Take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Trinette. I appreciate that introduction. So welcome, everybody. Like Trinette said, we're going to be talking about branding for school districts and unifying your voice identity and utilizing that to build stronger relationships in your community and sort of go over like practical things that we've done and what we've learned along the way, some of the roadblocks that we encountered, and hopefully this will be something that you can take back to your district and apply right away. But before we get into that, with just quick introductions from ourselves, I guess. My name is Dennis Deek. I am the digital media and content specialist for Visalia Unified. Like Trinette said, we're sort of in the middle of the state. We're in between Fresno and Bakersfield. 35,000 students, 42 school sites, and about 4,000 employees. So we're fairly large. I've been with Visalia Unified for about 2.5 years as a digital media and content specialist. When I joined, there was no communications department, so it was just a couple of us sort of starting that brand new team, which I believe we're going to have a session on CalSPRA on building teams. So make sure that you attend that because There were growing pains, but we got a lot done, so it was great. And prior to that, yes, my marketing background was with the California Pizza Kitchen, where I oversaw a lot of the innovation and menu development. And it was fun to see that in education, a lot of that is still applies. So a lot of those skills, hopefully that we'll be teaching you as well today, you'll be able to put into practice. And I'll hand it over to my co-presenter.
Thanks, Dennis. Yeah, I'm Cristina Gutierrez. I'm the Public Information Officer for VUSD. I've been here just under 2 years. And I also have a background in marketing and branding, which is how this presentation kind of got kicked off. And I've been through a rebrand before at my old organization, and I can say, that one, unfortunately, it was a full rebrand, but we didn't really work on the core narrative of the community and how the community felt. And so going from an unsuccessful rebrand to a successful brand refresh where we worked more on that narrative, it's just completely night and day. So hopefully we can have you guys take some of that stuff that we've done here and apply it to your organization. So I'm going to kick things off here with talking about the basics of branding. So Trinette, I don't know what the best way to do this, but can anyone give me a definition of what branding is, or what you feel branding, what branding is and why it matters? And you can unmute yourself. Can they unmute themselves, Trinette? Yeah,
yes,
you can
they should be
unmute yourselves. Yeah. So just anyone can go ahead, and if not, I'm going to pick someone. Don't be shy. It's okay.
You can put it in the chat too. If you don't feel like unmuting, maybe it's loud in your office, or something in the chat.
What is branding? Definition of branding. Okay, so anyone brave? Diego, I'm gonna call on you. Cameras are all off. Okay, well, for me, oh, here we go.
Yep, they're all coming in now.
Okay.
I don't know if you can see them all, Christina. And actually, Kelly Toomey sent one, but it went to me, that it is how a business portrays itself in the public and promotes itself.
Okay, good.
And
Yeah, image that represents you. Yeah.
San Diego County Office of Education, welcome. You guys don't have your camera on, but I know there's a bunch of people there. Yay. We're so glad to have that region hanging out with us today. And they said an image that represents you and lets your community know who you are. Melissa said identity. That's probably why they had it on mute.
Oh, yeah.
Fernanda said it's who we are.
Welcome, San Diego. We're a group of nearly 10. Yeah, those are all great, and I'm actually quite excited that we didn't see a lot of the assets, right? So like logo and colors. So my favorite definition of branding is actually by Debbie Millman, and she says branding is the profound manifestation of the human spirit. And really, while we control the logo and colors, typography, imagery, and all the components of a brand, really, your brand is defined by your audience. So we don't control our brand, our audience controls our brand. You can change all of these things, but if your audience still doesn't like your product or your service, your negative brand will remain. And that's what I talked about a little bit at the beginning, where that's what happened at my last organization. So moving along, I'm going to pass it over to Dennis to talk a little bit about our unique identity.
So before we even got started on the refresh that Christina brought up, we sort of had to take a look and step back to see like who we were as an organization and have conversations with executive of like, who do they see us as an organization, and how are we coming across to the community currently? So we started meeting regularly with an administration and really looking at the values, our mission and vision, how we were communicating prior to us joining this district as a new department, like how were those communications being perceived by the community, what platforms were they using, and then obviously going into like those more like the symbol, like the logo and the look and the feel. And we knew that to make any changes, we had to be consistent and focus on execution. So that's when we started looking like everything else that we should be doing as PR people, like looking at research and looking at the data of like where were we before we joined and what can we learn from that and what should be our next step. And Christina's going to talk a little bit about what that data looked like when we first started this journey of our rebrand.
Yeah, so back in 2021, Visalia Unified conducted a superintendent search with the help of our Tulare County Office of Education. And then we held community sessions to understand what our community was looking for in a superintendent. These are the results of that session, so I'll kind of put together, and you can see highlighted, communication was one of the highest priorities for our communication. So this is really what started to drive some of that conversation and putting communication at the top of a priority list for Visalia Unified. And in our next slide, Dennis, yes, perfect. Our board took this and listened to the community and actually developed our core beliefs and commitments that encompassed communication in the middle of it. So you can see under bullet number 2, consistent communication is right on there. And it became a priority for our organization. Our team used the board's direction to actually begin some of our work, and we took it and we aligned our team identity, our team's mission and our vision. So if you don't have one, this is something maybe to work towards. With our former administrator, we developed our mission and vision statement that aligned our work as a communications team to the board work. So we wanted to make sure that we could always make our case for why we are here as a team, and why it was important to have this consistent and transparent communication. So we had work to do to switch the perception of our organization, and Dennis will talk about how we aligned those efforts district-wide.
Yes. So one thing that I've learned working in the education system is that change is hard for educators. Like they really have a hard time making a change if there's not a why behind it, right? Like if you really take the time and educate them and explain to them why you're making something, they'll be more open and collaborative. But you really have to come prepared to have that conversation. So when we first started this, we really wanted to make sure that it's not just because these new kids in the Department of Communications that are brand new wanted to make a big splash. It was because we saw an opportunity to really align ourselves as an organization. And when we were auditing the different departments, we noticed that there was a lot of disconnection. And there were, even in meetings that we were having, we could see that we were sort of divided by who your department was, who was in your department, right? So that's when we started having conversations individually with folks around the district of who they are as a department, but also how do they fit in the bigger picture of Visalia Unified School District. And one of the first things that I noticed even joining this job was that every single department here had a different logo. And to me, that was so confusing because we had multiple buildings here in the district office. And when you go to one of the buildings here, you see all the logos, and it almost feels like they're just renting out a space to have their own unique business. So that just visually created some sort of division within our district. So we took it upon ourselves to sort of start educating people and making sure that it became visual. So we scheduled a meeting with executive cabinet, and we presented this slide right here. And I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm floating in the screen. This was not me being tech savvy. This was an accident. So I'm sorry, I'm sort of in the presentation. Okay, so we went with executive cabinet and we presented this slide. And they immediately saw it and they were like, absolutely not okay. We need to change this and we need to unify our departments. You can see, and these are not all of them. This is just some that I gathered. Every single department had their unique look and feel. And it was creating a lot of confusion and division. And some departments that I approached that didn't have a logo, they were like, well, we never had a budget, but we've been wanting our own logo. So there was confusion as to why some didn't, why some didn't. So executive approved, like, you know what, let's move away from that. Let's unify everyone. At this point, I had already had conversations with directors and coordinators, sort of brought them into this conversation so they feel like they're a part of this change. Because I don't want to come and be like, executive cabinet told us, so you're going to do it, right? Like we have to make sure that you're building those relationships, you're having that conversation and really explaining to them what visually this creates to not just our employees, but our community, right? Like they come and they get confused. So with the help of the executive cabinet, we created our universal logo. So this is what it currently looks like for all our departments that have a new logo. Obviously, this wasn't a perfect conversation. There were some people that had a hard time with this, even after we explained the why, which was important for us to have executive cabinet on board, but also we didn't just flip the switch and we immediately rolled this all out. We gave them a whole year for them to deplete any materials or anything that they have invested resources into to utilize it and maximize all that. But everything that was new, we just asked that please utilize our new universal logo moving forward. You'll see here that while this is our primary logo here in the bottom corner, oh, I guess this is when this is useful right here. This is our primary logo, and this became our secondary logo. And I'll go a little bit over that in a minute. But this put into perspective of people, like now we have who we are, our division, and your department, and created so much clarity within everyone in the community as to how we're structured. After that, it just became a matter of like, let's help people that are not creative understand how to be creative with our look and feel. So these are the fonts that we approve of. These are some of the colors that you can use. Here are some of the accent colors that you can utilize for your materials. There is a really cool website that you can just put your primary color and it gives you like scientifically like colors that are matching that that primary color. So if you don't know what your accent colors or you want to have somewhere to start, let me know and I can send that website to you. And then obviously people know that this needs to be changed, but you also need to educate them on what's okay and what's not okay. So this is how our logo looks like, our primary logo. And that's what the proper use of it is. But we also need to understand that there's improper ways to use that. So even the simple as don't rotate it, don't distort it, don't change the color, don't add old logos. It used to be a thing that every superintendent would put their tagline like underneath it. So materials every few years would get outdated because that was that specific superintendent. And then the next one will put it right on our logo and they would spend so many resources just updating all of it, right? So that's also important to show that there are ways to misuse your logo. And then there's variations too. So our superintendent did not approve for us to have a new logo. He wanted to respect the one that sort of been around for a long time. So that's when we had the creative liberty to sort of see what we can maximize out of our logo and make it modern and fresh. So this was our logo. This logo has been here for many, many, many years. So then we started creating variations of that logo. So how do we keep the integrity of it, but allow people in different departments to have a different version that they can utilize for different materials. So now they can put this in, if they have a flyer that doesn't have a lot of space, they can add their secondary logo and it's approved by executive cabinet. Then if you're creating materials for print or whatever, you can use our self-mark or brand mark right here. And then our icon was where we had the most fun because this is sort of like what we use for social media, what we use for any of our materials that are more like swag oriented or marketing materials, like they usually get our fun icon. And our superintendent loves this V and is sort of becoming, you can see right behind Christina, I'm right next to her, like here, like we put that V everywhere and the community has gotten used to it, you know? So it's a good way of honoring what you have, your primary logo, not changing it, but making something fresh out of it. And sorry, one second. And then I'll hand it over to Christina, because now that we were sort of putting all of our assets together, we still needed to make sure that we understood what our voice was and what we sounded like and how we were going to communicate to our community. And she'll go a little bit and talk about that part of our branding.
Yeah, and I've worked with a lot of branding agencies because I've been doing branding and marketing for such a long time. And a lot of the time I noticed that these agencies would miss the voice piece of branding guidelines. So as we've developed, as Dennis developed our branding guidelines, we wanted to make a concerted effort to make sure we didn't miss this crucial piece of our voice. And so just this slide just shows you a couple of different ways that you could be perceived. Different organizations choose different tones and different voices. So these are just a few: bold, transparent, inspirational, honest. So just that's for you guys. And so if you've seen this slide, we touched on this slide before, you can see that for us, to control our narrative and directly respond to our community's concerned, we decided that our voice was going to be transparent, and trustworthy and relevant, and we wanted to create pride in our organization. So if you go back to our social media, you'll actually see that for the first year, our goal, and we posted once a day, every single day, not weekends, although sometimes we did. But we posted every single day because we wanted to be consistent and we wanted to be relevant, and we wanted to use a lot of those posts that we did that first year. We're creating pride just around Visalia Unified and our staff, and who worked here, because we also were trying to humanize, right, who we were, and put some of that into that. And so our voice is so critical, and it's critical to your organization. So you should include it into your branding guidelines. And this slide is just how we've incorporated it into our guidelines. And you can see that we call out its importance. We talk about personality and voice. And so we have multiple people on our team that post on social media all of the time. And we make a concerted effort also to make sure that we sound the same, and we're guided by these, by what we put here of wanting to be transparent. We also developed a tagline, and actually that was already there, but we just kind of figured out how we use it throughout our different items. And then we created hashtags. And what's really cool now, because we've switched those hashtags into our New Year campaign, is actually going back and seeing how many times that hashtag was used. And I'll tell you, everyone knew to use this hashtag. All of our staff, all of our community knew that if you used IMVUSD, that we would see that post. And so it's important for you to call that out in your branding guidelines. So here are just a few. So even with district topics, right, our district stays the same. We're talking about FAFSA. We're talking about some fun High Five Fridays. We're talking about outreach, and you can see that our voice and our tone stays the same. We're not afraid to use exclamation points, but use them sparingly. But everyone should be able to read that and not know that there's a different human being behind it, right? And sometimes, and just kind of going into the next slide, we use each other as sounding boards. So we'll often either put it on our Monday app, on our communications app, and say, "Hey, I'm about to post. Can someone just make sure, review this, take a look at it? What are your thoughts?" So we use each other as sounding boards to make sure that that voice stays the same. And sometimes, right, we'll have some edits here and there, but for the most part, we're pretty much in sync. So here's kind of where I wanted to do a little bit of an activity. Take a second, and I think, Trinette, can we put them in breakout rooms? We're just going to take a couple of minutes, and in your breakout rooms, think about and talk about who is that sounding board for you. If you're in a team, who might that be? And if you're not in a team, who can you go to be that sounding board for you? And then I think,
right.
there we go.
You should be invited into a room.
Cool.
Because I didn't want mine to stop.
How's it going so far,
Yeah, are we going?
It's really good. I was just looking at the rooms. There's one room that only has 2 people, but I think it's okay.
I
We
think
can at least chat with each other.
I see some people are here still with us.
Yeah, there's a lot of folks that turn on and then they're not necessarily actually here.
Oh,
So
gotcha.
you have to actively accept your invitation.
Gotcha. Okay. They're probably just on audio.
Yeah. No, it's great. I love this breakout rooms too and sessions. I like it when there's a little bit more engagement. Dennis, one of the folks afterwards would like to know the website to find the accent color. So be ready to share that in the chat. I'll ask you at the end.
Can you see my email on the share screen or no?
I wouldn't share it in the chat while they're in breakout rooms because I don't think they get it if they're not actually in the main room. So I would wait.
Okay, I'll have it copied on my thing already.
Great.
Perfect.
And I think we'll just take like another minute or so and then bring them back.
Okay, when I close it, they'll have 1 minute to come back. Are you ready for me to do that?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
We had like another activity in person, but it wouldn't have worked here. So it's okay. It works.
Yeah, you have to adjust. Zoom is a little bit different than the in-person situation. I'll be closing in about 10 seconds.
They're all back.
All right. Welcome back. I hope you had some good conversations in those breakout rooms. Would anyone like to share out who their sounding board is? Either put it on the chat or feel free to unmute yourself if you feel comfortable. Especially if you have, if you're that team of one, really curious to see who you utilize as that sounding board for you.
Hi everyone, I'm Martha. I'm in Colorado, just down the street from Visalia Unify.
Sure.
I'm brand new, brand new to the team. I am a one-person team, and for the most part, to ensure some consistency, I just utilize whatever colleague has a spare minute or two. So primarily it's just me, but whenever I get the chance and I have somebody that can spare those couple of minutes, I take advantage. And that's kind of who I have as my unofficial team, but my team. But that's basically how I manage.
No, that's so important. And it's so important as like a team of one to have, to even just have other people to go to for just advice or to listen to you kind of talk through some things and use them as a thought partner. So that's great. I'm glad you have that. And I see some comments on the chat as well. Team of one, PIO friends in the county. Yep. No, that's great. Perfect. It's harder when Shital says it is harder when you are a department of one like Maureen and I in San Jose. We utilize other folks in the district. I mentioned I also sometimes reach out to fellow PIOs in the Bay Area. Yeah. Team of three, me, myself, and I, Lance. Way to go, Lance. Yeah, and sometimes we have, especially as we deal with crisis communications, right? Like those are really fast moments where you're really just needing to just bounce those ideas off. So for crisis comms, I really work with our safety team, and we've gotten into a good rhythm of like, here's what we sound like, here's what our message looks like. The core is very much the same, but just those little details in the middle is really what we change. So it's important to have those people. Thank you so much. Anyone else want to share before we move on? Oh, Diego, prior to being a part of a team, my sounding board would be my Cosper buddies. And yeah. Now my sounding board is Hannah, who is sitting right next to me. And it's been such a breath of fresh air to have someone else to work with and not have to do it all my own. Yes. Hi, Hannah. Fantastic. Yes, you guys go. That's great. It's always so nice to have at least one person. And we use other departments too. I think Dennis mentioned he goes with, he's our liaison for our HR department. And so he'll often go to them when they're talking about HR related matters, right? And so he brings our voice as a district, but then really kind of hones it in with the HR as well. So we don't sound too separate. Okay, great. Thank you guys so much for sharing. So moving on to the next slide. I'm going to give it over to Dennis to talk about our branding strategy.
Awesome. And before I do that, I'm going to share that link in the comments, the one that I was talking about with the color scientifically, like the colors wheel that gives you other colors. So you can play around with it and see what comes up for you. And that way you can sort of keep your messaging aligned and looking designing wise. really nice. Okay. So great. Yes, I do partner with, I am walking up and down our halls in our district office all day long, not because I don't want to do my job, but because there's so much value on getting other departments on board with what you're doing. Like they feel like they're a part of the decisions that you're making. Communication is not surprising them anymore because they understand the process from the beginning to the end, not just to get their buy-in, but also like Christina said, they're providing feedback along the way. And then at the end, it just becomes such a better product than if just a 2 or 3 of us in a communications team would have put it out. So yes, definitely find other people in other departments. It's great, especially if you trust that they understand your voice already. It's tricky when you're just going to random people because maybe they have a personal opinion that might align with what they understand. But if they really understand the district as a whole, like those are excellent people to have on your team. So yeah, so brand strategy, obviously everything that we do has to be strategic and it has to be a good use of our time. And everything that we do, we got pretty lucky. Our superintendent is really supportive of our efforts if we have the data and if we can be strategic about it. So at this point of our journey, we already understood what our guidelines were, which are a lot of those slides that we just showed are in our guidelines, but I can share the entire document with you guys as well. We understood the voice, how we wanted to come across. Our communications channels were a little tricky when we first started because we were not on social media at all. Prior to us joining, it was that time between the pandemic that people were sort of very edgy and the comments were not the nicest. So a lot of districts sort of chose to close up and not be accessible at all. And that's sort of like what the district chose. And they didn't have a communications department, so it's to no one's fault. But when I first started, there was no social media at all. So we immediately opened all those up and we created new accounts just to make sure that we're reaching every target audience that we wanted to. And we strategized on how to use each one so that we maximize that platform. And really understanding our employees, like how can we really leverage them? Like Christina said, it started to celebrating each other. And at first we did notice like, those old habits of attacking us right away wouldn't die down. People were like, oh, you celebrate IT, but why don't you celebrate nutritional services, So that was when we were like, you know what? Next post, nutritional service. Next post is, so we were on it. Like we were really trying to understand our employees and the culture that was within, because that's really important as part of your branding, like the culture. And also the community. Who are they going to get their news from? And how can we be the go-to source, like we stated on our mission statement? So Christina will talk a little bit more about that journey of where we started and how our media coverage has shifted.
Yeah. And so Dennis made a great point. So we poll our community a lot. So not just through the comments, but we actually do poll them throughout the year. We find key moments to poll them and talk and have them kind of tell us how much they trust our communications, how they're feeling, anything they want to see, so that we make sure that we're posting some of those things as well. But yeah, at this point in our journey, we've worked now on our branding guidelines and now really is trying to control that narrative, right? We talked about the district being, secretive and holding back on social media. So in 2020, our district was known to be secretive, to be unsafe. We were silent and others took control of our narrative. So when we listened, these are just some of those stories from 22 through 24. And these are just the ones I could put on this page, but now you're seeing those key messages. We are student-centered, we are safe, and we are aligned as an organization. And that took a lot of work just controlling the messages that were going out and putting more of that positivity out there, because you can't deny these stories, right, that are going out. So just wanted to share that with you all on there. So moving along, Janice is actually gonna talk about, after this slide, these are just, when you're talking about branding, right? Branding is really hard to measure because again, we talked about that definition of branding, which is, your community's perception of who you are, of what you're offering. And so that's really hard to try and like bundle up into some kind of measurement, but there are things that can help you along the way to kind of see whether you're being that source of that information. So what does your website traffic look like? What does your social media engagement look like? What are people saying? Do people recognize your logo? And so Dennis, on the next slide, he's going to talk about how we as an internal team, right, we had our own key metrics and our own things that we wanted to measure, and what those were for us.
Yes, and like I said, our superintendent is great. If you present him with the data and the numbers, he'll support you through and through. So that has been a blessing for us that we have such good support from the top down. But he does want to see the data. He wants to see the numbers. And one of the first things that he challenges with was growing our following, because we knew that other small bloggers or smaller accounts in our community were really loud, and people were getting their news from them. And sometimes it was inaccurate, sometimes it was blown up, it was way more than it actually was. So taken out of proportion. So we knew that we needed to grow our numbers. And part of that strategy was what Christina said, posting every day, and every single story had a spot in our social media. And we were constantly interacting and getting engagement. And we immediately started seeing those followers go up. We immediately saw that we became a go-to source by really committing to being consistent and really having that clear voice of who we were. And the community immediately reacted to it. It only took a couple of months before we started seeing that our comment section was completely different. It was a completely different comment section, and we could see how strategies like this are really successful. Also, our cabinet really wanted to see why our efforts were, or how our efforts were successful. So if you have a team that's more visual, these are some of the things that we put like way back at the beginning. I mean, this was like a month in of me being in the job. So it is never too early or too late. You can still get data from all those social media channels. Put it into perspective, like show people how every post matters. Like even if it's just a story highlighting a student, whatever you put out there, put it into something that shows the data, and they'll see the value in what you're doing. You can see here at first, I would focus on highlighting our comment section and all the positive things that the community were commenting about, because it was really negative. And it was some areas of opportunity. Like I said, if people felt left out because they were in a department that we hadn't highlighted, we made it a point to highlight them. Never take it personal. It's obviously not about you. You shouldn't be reactive. You shouldn't be making it so that it's on your shoulders. This is the bigger picture of the organization. So think about it that way, and just make small steps to get to where your brand is so solid that these opportunities become far few in between, right? It's just mostly when there are crises that are going to come up, but not in every single post. You're just going to get attacked. And case studies. So obviously we're not perfect. We also look at other districts and what they're doing. Large districts usually have a bigger budget, so they usually have a team that can really flesh out their identity and their content, while maybe it's not as personable, I would say, like we are. Like we're just highlighting specific people because our community is small and they know each other. They still have a very solid look. Like you understand what their colors are. You understand that they're seeing it through and through in every single post they make. They bring it into their website. So take a look at those districts that maybe have a similar size to you, or maybe are doing something that resonates with who you think you are. Maybe bring it in with your team. Like, are we sort of aligning with who they are? You can see here, LA Unified. These are a little bit older, but you can see like their messaging is more informational. They leave it mostly to the sides, but you can see like night and day, like it's completely different districts, right? Like they understand who they are, they understand their color scheme, their materials reflect that, and even their wording, right? Like their voice is very consistent. So, I mean, we're not a case study, but this is just sort of like where we are. This is sort of like what we strive for. This is last year's campaign. Every time we put a campaign, we try to see it through. We try to not confuse people with too much additional branding that is confusing, but we do have a yearly campaign that brings culture and spirit to our district. So there's a fine line of navigating of like, you already understand who you are, but you're bringing new ideas and fresh design with campaigns. And that's sort of like what our current reality is. We're really proud of all the stride that we've made.
Can I add something?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So, and just to add a little bit, and Dennis shared those two specific examples because they're so stark from one another, but that's just to show you that there's no wrong way of how you want to show your tone or your voice, or how you want to utilize your social media platforms. Long Beach and LAUSD, completely different, right? On how they're using it. They're not wrong, but you can see that they're each consistent in the way that they're doing it. They're not one day being happy and preppy and using exclamation points, and the next day using college level writing, right? Which you never want to do anyway. You always want to stick to that third grade, level of education, unless, your community is, has more education. And in that way, you can adjust there. But there's no wrong way. It just being consistent and knowing that tone throughout your organization is super critical. Sorry, Dennis, I didn't mean to
That's
interrupt.
great.
Go.
Yes, but please do a lot of research. I mean, that's part of our processes, right? The RPI, like research is number one. Go look to see what is working for other people. Absolutely. Get Kalsprout partners to take a look at your stuff and then maybe see where you can get some inspiration from. That's what we do. I know every time we are making website updates, I've started to look at different folks that utilize one final site, but also are a similar size, and maybe they understand, they have a pretty solid team, so they understand how to organize things. So yes, do your research and see how you can implement some of those inspiration ideas. And with that, that's sort of the end of the presentation. But if you have any questions, we would love to take the last 15 minutes to answer any of them.
Well, you guys are thinking of questions really fast too. Our superintendent, obviously he's newer. He's been here a few years now, but he comes from Georgia, Tennessee area in the South. And so a lot of the time Dennis and I will get like emails with samples of things like, hey, I really like this district's, thing. And so Dennis and I will like come together and be like, okay, what pieces do you like? How do we then bring our Visalia unified spirit to what he's sharing with us, and how much does it actually correlate? So we do get a lot of that research too from our superintendent of what he's looking for. Just always make sure that you're looking at your audience, your community, what works for you in implementation. And then I see we have a hand. Melissa. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Melissa from Lake Elsinore Unified. Has this carried over to your school sites? We are struggling a little bit, not just at a district level, but refreshing logos for our sites. Some of them are just really outdated.
Yeah, so our efforts were district office specific. Like we didn't want to touch the schools until we knew we could commit to really fleshing out their materials. What we did with the school sites is we wanted, because we have 42 of them, we made sure that we had the final logo on file, and we have that on our specific branding folder that everyone can access every single school site logo. So the latest and greatest is always there. We have a primary color for every school site and secondary colors for every school site. Other than that, because we have so many sites, we sort of allow them to get that spirit, like that culture and spirit going with their materials, but we can't really oversee that many. So we just sort of lead by example of like what our content looks like. And we allow them to utilize what we have in our brand guidelines, and we set those parameters with their colors.
I will say though, to Dennis, to Dennis's credit too, he has a really great relationship with our print shop. And Visalia Unified, we have a print shop where a lot of their materials go through an internal print shop and before they go back out. And because we have such a good relationship with the graphic designer there, the graphic designer actually is able to kind of be like, hey, wait, this doesn't quite flow with what we've been doing. And so that collaboration there and being able to kind of share those assets, and everyone has the same things, and having an understanding of branding guidelines and what it should look like is super important. So if you can have a couple of people at each site that just really understand your branding guidelines, how you want things to look, is the most crucial. And I will say that first year of implementation, you're going to be doing a lot of correction. No, use this logo, use this logo. Hey, here are the branding guidelines again. There's a lot of correction in that first year to get you to get everyone on the same page. Does that help?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Perfect.
There was another question from Kay about the talking points that you used for unifying all of the department logos?
Yeah, that was a very short meeting because I was prepared to come and make a case, and they immediately saw the need to make a change. I think if you have an issue sort of like what we had with many logos, and people just keep siloing themselves in their own departments, put it in a visual way that they can see it, and just explain to them maybe a little bit of the slideshow. Like if branding is about unifying everyone, and if you're not immediately associated with the bigger organization, then there's some opportunity there to bring you in. And that's allowed us to even have more collaboration with each other, because now we're not having to go into this building where every decal, like every wall is decal with like gold and black because they decided that was their colors. And now everyone is just sort of aligned, and they understand. It did take a year, like Christina said, to sort of have people get in the groove of things. And now we get people just, it was a lot of go back and forth, like, what do you think of this? Or like, is this okay? But now we just feel we're at such a good spot that people are really taken into that voice themselves. But with executive cabinet, honestly, like, come prepared with visuals yeah, it was just an easy conversation for us, but I hope it is the same with you. We did have our superintendent look at it first because he is part of that meeting as well. So we didn't blindside him. Like, he obviously needed the buy-in from his executive members, but he knew about it. Most of the directors, I had already had a chat with them so that no one saw this for the first time in that meeting. Even executive cabinet, I had gone through like our HR, because I partner with them a lot. Our executive cabinet member from HR had seen it. So at that point, it was more like, what is our next step? It wasn't like I'm seeing this for the first time and I'm like, where are all these coming from,
It's also super great if you know kind of how your superintendent or your executive cabinet in general, how they learn best. And we have a superintendent that is very visual. And so that's his way. And we use it when we go in for presentations, because we know he's so visual. We love to bring in props, and we like to show him what it'll look like. And we'll have a printed, shirt just to show him. And it helps a ton to get him on our side. So
Yeah, but sorry, and this is not related to that specifically, but understanding your team is so crucial, because the main reason why we started a Twitter account was because most of our administrators were on Twitter. And if they didn't see it on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, wherever else, they thought we didn't do it, right? So now we have that platform and we post there because now they can see our efforts and they can see our communications. Whether or not we have a huge following doesn't matter, because now we're exposing them to that communication. So that's also a part of understanding your team and how they work and how they visualize their materials.